The Hugh Jackman Diaries.
I woke up, I opened my eyes and looked around. I was curled up in bed. Well, more twisted than curled. And it was more a ditch than a bed. I kicked off the ironing board. I was using it as a doona. I'd been carrying that ironing board around with me for a couple of days now. I'd been out nick-knocking with newsreader Anton Enis, and we found it in hard rubbish. It gave me a great idea. Instead of knocking on doors and running away, we'd wait for people to come to the door. I'd say, "I am Iron Man," and whack them in the head with the ironing board. Anton would stand there making wanking gestures. Then we'd run off, pissing ourselves. It was brilliant. The biggest innovation in nick-knocking I'd come up with since the casserole catapult in 2006. Somehow, we ended up at Ian Turpie's joint. He lives in a bungalow in the backyard of some Indian family. It's not like he's fallen on hard times or anything. The opposite. This bungalow is an improvement on the last one. At least this one has a door, and walls, and a roof, and a floor. We got there and looked in his window. We saw him playing Cannibal Corpse at full volume, singing along to every word at the top of his voice, in his jocks, slumped against the wall. In one hand he had a bottle of scotch. With the other hand he'd made a fist, with which he was repeatedly punching himself in the face. It had been years since I'd seen Terps. It was reassuring to see that he hasn't changed a bit. He let us in. He offered to pour us a drink. Me and Ants looked at him in horror. Then Terps broke out laughing, said he was only joking, and he knows full well that me and Ants don't ever pour drinks into glasses. We swig. I grabbed a bottle of chartreuse from Terps's liquor cabinet, which also doubled as a fish tank. I grabbed another bottle of chartreuse for when the first one ran out. Then I grabbed another bottle of chartreuse and gave it to Ants, and told him to hold it for me. We had a good time drinking, laughing, and prank calling Jack Thompson. Terps eventually excused himself and announced he was going to adjourn to the toilet to pass out. What a guy. Most people would go to bed. Not Terps. He planned ahead. Then I looked around his bungalow and noticed that there was no bed anyway. The toilet was the closest thing. Ants was looking sleepy. I sat back and waited for him to fall asleep. I got sick of waiting, so I grabbed the ironing board and whacked him around the head with it until he peacefully drifted off into unconsciousness. I was blessed to have two such buddies. True friends. Still, that wasn't enough to stop me from taking the cash from both their wallets and hightailing it out of there on Terps's little silver scooter. I was flying down Sydney Road on Terps's scooter, the ironing board and a bottle of chartreuse tucked under one arm. Passers-by stopped and stared. I gave them a loud Wolverine scream, just to let them know it really was me. Then I stopped and gave them a genuine, officially endorsed Wolverine brown eye. There was a booze bus up ahead. I knew I was fine, but I thought I'd save the boys in blue the awkwardness of meeting a real-life superstar like me. So I carefully and subtly dropped the scooter there in the middle of the road and jumped in a ditch. And now here I was, waking up in the ditch. I needed something to happen. So I did the same thing I do every time I wake up in a ditch. I crawled out into the middle of the road and lay there. It's remarkable just how effective this technique is for making stuff happen. It was awesome. Immediate. Cars were beeping their horns in celebration. People were getting out of their cars. They crowded around me. They seemed a little worked up. Poor things. Seeing me lying there in the middle of the road, it confused them. They never would have seen me lying down before. I don't do death scenes. It's against the natural order. I lie down in front of a camera and the camera bursts into flames. But lying down in the middle of the road is a different matter. It's a great way to meet people. People gathered round. Most of them wanted to know how on earth I came to be so different to and better than everyone else. Specifically, I think their words were, "What the hell is the matter with me?" One kind young man asked if I needed to be taken to a hospital. I said, "You need to be taken to a hospital," and pissed myself laughing. He said, "Seriously, do you need to be taken to a hospital?" I said, "You need to be taken to a hospital." He said, "I'm trying to help. For the last time, do you need to be taken to a hospital?" And then I looked up into the eyes of this Samaritan. I stopped, considered my situation for a moment, then said, "You need to be taken to a hospital." Pissed myself laughing. I saw one of them wicked camper vans sitting there, covered in graph. It was so tacky and gimmicky. I got nothing against street art, but if there's one type of art I can't stand, it's graph that doesn't carry my tag. I got up, ran over and covered it in my tag, all over the side. Then realised I'd run over to the wrong vehicle and had tagged some family station wagon. It was still an improvement though. There was some kid sitting in the back of the station wagon. He had a Ben 10 mask. I promised I'd return it. I put the mask on, ran over to the wicked camper and jumped on the roof and treated everyone there to a dance number from my recent record-breaking solo show from Broadway. It was a modified version though. Instead of singing and dancing to show tunes, I just pretended to play the ironing board like a guitar and shouted out my own name over and over again. It was awesome. Me, Hugh Jackman, wearing a Ben 10 mask, playing guitar on an ironing board I'd found in hard rubbish on top of a wicked camper in the middle of Sydney Road. The people stood around and watched as the wicked camper driver got in and started the engine. The wicked camper drove off into the sunset with me on the roof. It was perfect. Visual poetry. The only way it could have been more perfect would have been if I didn't tumble off and fall onto me back in the middle of the road when it started driving off. But that's a minor quibble. The people wouldn't have noticed anyway. All they cared about was that they'd had an encounter with a Broadway Hollywood superstar. The best there is, was, and is Hugh Jackman.
The Hugh Jackman Diaries.